Let me say something up front, plainly before the comment section starts warming its engines. Yes, we absolutely need to stop terrorists from entering the West. That is not controversial. That is not negotiable. That is not something serious people debate. Borders exist for a reason. Intelligence agencies exist for a reason. And pretending that violent extremism magically disappeared because we're uncomfortable talking about it is how people get hurt. But, and this is a big but, if thinking Donald Trump is a dickhead becomes a meaningful factor in whether someone can enter the United States, then we are no longer talking about security. We are talking about ideological gatekeeping, and that is a dangerous game. The policy change you probably haven't clocked yet. The US government is moving toward expanding social media screening for tourists, especially those coming from visa-free countries like the UK and much of Europe. Under the proposed changes, travellers may be required to hand over years of social media handles, emails, phone numbers, and potentially other digital identifiers before being allowed entry. Not suspected terrorists, not people on watch lists, ordinary tourists, people coming for holidays, work trips, conferences, the World Cup. The pitch is simple. We need more data to keep people safe. And again, on the surface that sounds reasonable, but scratch that surface and something starts to smell off. Security is not the same as ideological compliance. Here's the core problem. Terrorism is a behavior, extremism is an intent, violence is an action. Political opinions are none of those things. If someone has expressed support for ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or any violent extremist group, that is absolutely relevant to border security. If someone has posted about wanting to kill civilians, overthrow governments through violence, or carry out attacks, that is absolutely relevant. But if someone tweeted 5 years ago that Trump was a narcissistic man-baby with bad hair and worse impulse control, that is not a security threat. That is a political opinion. And once political opinion becomes grounds for restriction, the border stops being a security checkpoint and starts becoming an ideological filter. History is extremely clear on how that story ends. It never ends well. The slippery slope. Everyone pretends isn't slippery. People love to mock the phrase slippery slope like it's some paranoid fantasy, but governance doesn't change in giant jumps. It changes through normalization. First it's, we're just checking for extremist content. Then it becomes, well, hostility to the state could indicate risk. Then, anti-government sentiment correlates with instability. Then, let's err on the side of caution. And suddenly, your edgy meme folder is being interpreted by a border agent with 3 minutes to decide whether you're allowed in. This is not theoretical, this is how bureaucracies work. They expand their remit, not because they're evil, but because systems always want more data. Data feels like control, control feels like safety, and safety becomes the justification for everything. The problem with social media as evidence. Social media is not a diary, it's not a confession booth, it's not a psychological profile, it is a performance space. People posture, they exaggerate, they joke, they rage post at 2 a.m. They share half-baked thoughts that don't survive a morning coffee. Turning that into intelligence data is like trying to diagnose someone's mental health from their group chat. It's messy, it's contextless, and it's wildly open to misinterpretation. A sarcastic tweet becomes hostile rhetoric. A dark joke becomes violent language. A political rant becomes anti-state sentiment. And who is interpreting all this? Not philosophers, not cultural experts, not psychologists, border officials under pressure, with quotas, vague guidelines, and zero time. That's not intelligence work, that's vibes-based governance. The chilling effect no one wants to admit. Even if this system never outright bans people for political opinions, it still does damage. Because once people know their digital lives are being combed through by foreign governments, behaviour changes. People self-censor, people delete posts, people avoid discussing politics, people retreat from public discourse. Not because they're guilty, but because uncertainty breeds fear, and when democracies start producing fear around speech, something has gone very wrong. Freedom of expression doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes quietly through caution and compliance. That's the chilling effect. Security theatre versus actual security. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This kind of mass social media screening looks tough, but it's not necessarily effective. The most dangerous actors are not broadcasting their intentions on Instagram. Serious extremists use encrypted platforms, speak in coded language, maintain clean public profiles, understand surveillance better than most civilians. So who does this system actually catch? Tourists, students, journalists, activists, people with opinions, in other words, the people least likely to pose a threat, which means this risks becoming security theatre, high intrusion, low payoff, a massive data dragnet that makes governments feel proactive while doing little to stop genuinely organised threats. The World Cup problem. Let's talk timing. The US is about to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup alongside Mexico and Canada, millions of visitors, global attention, soft power on display. Now imagine fans from Europe, Africa, Asia, arriving only to find their entry delayed or denied because of something they tweeted years ago. What message does that send? Not strength, not confidence. It sends the message that the land of free speech is nervous about speech. That's not how you project leadership, that's how you project fragility. The real question we should be asking, the question isn't, should we protect our borders? Of course we should. The real question is, where is the line between security and ideological control? And more importantly, who gets to draw that line? Because once you let governments decide which opinions are acceptable for entry, you've set a precedent that won't stay confined to tourists. Students are next, workers are next, journalists are next, and once that logic exists, other countries copy it. Congratulations, you've just helped normalize global political vetting. That's a world nobody should want. You can walk and chew gum. Here's the part that gets lost in all the shouting. We do not have to choose between safety and freedom. We can target actual threats, focus on behavior and intent, use intelligence, not ideology, respect dissent as non-violent, protect borders without policing beliefs that is not naive. That is mature governance. Democracies are supposed to be strong enough to tolerate criticism, even hostile criticism, without panicking. If a country cannot withstand tourists thinking its president is an idiot, that country has bigger problems than border security. This policy direction isn't evil, but it is careless. And history is littered with careless decisions justified by fear. We should be vigilant against terrorism, absolutely. But we should be just as vigilant against the quiet creep of ideological surveillance. Because once borders stop asking what you intend to do and start asking what you think, you're no longer defending freedom, you're filtering it, and that's a game with consequences no one ever thinks they'll live to see, until they do. Not left, not right, just real.